Deltarune Chapters 3 and 4 were released on June 5th, 2025, and with them came new jokes and gags that needed to be localized for the Japanese audience. As always, I'll be going over notable differences in Chapters 3 and 4, starting with Tenna. The main gimmick of Tenna's dialogue is the stylized word art sprites he uses to emphasize words. Pretty much all of these sprites had to be redone in Japanese, of course. Here they are alongside their English counterparts. Notice that the Susie Zilla sprites look very different. The English one seems to be based on the Marvel comic logos, considering the shape and the gradient, while the Japanese one is based on the poster for the original 1954 film. Another gimmick that's unique to the Japanese version is that whenever Tenna uses the word desho or masho, it's written as de sho, with sho written in English. The opening cinematic was not redubbed, by the way, but they did add subtitles. When Tenna asks you to select your name, in the English version, the joke is there's only 3 letters, so there's not enough space for Chris's full name. In Japanese, though, 3 characters is enough to write kurisu, so instead, the joke is that the middle character is broken and stuck on the character's soul, making it impossible to write Chris's name. Some characters have been excluded from the options to make it impossible to write inappropriate words. However, you can make it say kusoda, meaning this is shit or this sucks, which is also what Susie chooses. Japanese doesn't really have swear words in the same way as English, but there are words that are considered inappropriate for television, or hōsō kinshi yogo. Luckily, Tenna says kuso isn't one of those words, so it's fine. Also, the boards are now referred to as parks, just because that phrasing makes a bit more sense to a Japanese audience. Susie's kiss the my ass apron was changed to kusodari, which means something like fucking lame. The lyrics for Raise Up Your Bat were adjusted to keep it singable. I'll be displaying both sets of translated lyrics as the song plays, the original and Ralsei's version. Enjoy! The typical phrase for a sponsor shoutout in Japanese is to say,
この番組はご覧のスポンサーの提供でお送りします
which means, this show is brought to you by the sponsors you see here. So for the a word from our sponsors joke, Tenna says this phrase, and then the screen flashes the text, ご覧のスポンサー. The implication here is that the sponsor for the show is literally just called ご覧のスポンサー. For the worm from our sponsors version, Tenna says, and now a word from the worm conservation company, Happy Worm, before showing the worms escaping from rules. Here the joke isn't really a pun like the English one, but more so a joke about how the worms are happier away from rules. Just south of the green room, there's this vending machine with a buy option, where you just say bye to it and leave. For Japanese, you'll see there's 2 options that say kao, which means to buy, but the second one is in katakana, and when you press it, the machine goes moo, revealing that's actually cow as in the animal. In the S-rank room, the Dust Bunny has the line, "Dustin makes me feel good," which is a reference to the song Bustin from Ghostbusters. This was changed to "Hokori nante nai sa, hokori nante uso sa," meaning there's no dust, dust is a lie. This is a reference to a line from a nursery rhyme that goes "Obake nante nai sa, obake nante uso sa," meaning there's no ghosts, ghosts are a lie. If you talk to Swilver Sam, he actually speaks in English and says the same thing he normally says, but just written in katakana. And the same is true for these signs in Man Country. This sign is also English, but it's altered a bit to "Non-man is welcome too." I'm sure some people are also curious about the Forgotten Man, but honestly, there's nothing particularly notable about his lines here. They're pretty much just the direct translation. No major adjustments need to be made, despite how cryptic they are. If you give the blue ribbon to Ralse over and over again, he does these little cheers to spell out, "Chris and Susie are my friends." For the Japanese version, he does the same thing, but just says the syllables each time, without the rest of the cheer. Equipping the lodestone to Susie causes her to say the pun, "Escargot? Escar gross." This was translated to, "Katatsumuri? Muri da na," or "Snails? No way." During battle, Tenna says his favorite color is brown. In Japanese, CRTs are called brown tubes, named after Carl Ferdinand Braun, their inventor. The song in the church about the legend of Deltarune was also localized to remain singable. Here's the lyrics. When you talk to Snowy, he tells us a joke. Snowy ends his questions here with kai, which is a softer version of ka, which is how you usually mark a question. The word for church is kyokai, and the word for today is kyo. So Snowy plays with these words to make a bad pun, by first asking Chris when they came to church, and then follows it up with kyokai, kyo kitankai, kyokai ni. Bangin' sermon, my man, becomes kyo no seppo gekiatsu. Gekiatsu is a slang word used for something really cool and exciting, and literally means extremely hot. So this line means something like, "Today's sermon was fire." Instead of "Chris will sing swears," everyone says Chris will sing kae uta, meaning song parodies. Sadly, the weird root joke didn't survive translation. The term the fandom decided on for it is the eiruto, which stands for alternate route. But in this line, Susie says henna tenkai, meaning weird development or situation. Basically just a direct translation of the original. The streamers I watched had no reaction to this line as a result. If you choose to listen to Pizza Pants, he'll mention memes that Pizzarina sends him, like the frog on a unicycle. The Japanese says, "These vintage Kochitsuru manga memes for me?" The name Kochitsuru is a parody of the manga Kochikame, which is the source of a lot of old Japanese memes. In case anyone was wondering, the Clopin joke is left untranslated since the joke is easy enough to understand as is. For the infamous Among Us reference, they made it a little more obvious here. Well, that's true, this room has a pretty guilty vibe to it. Like, isn't that vent kinda suspicious? Susie plays the Space Werewolf game too. To clarify, werewolf games in Japanese refer to social deduction games since it originates from the game Werewolf, or sometimes called Mafia. But she specifies space here, which makes it pretty unambiguous what she's referring to. One of the wallpapers on Noelle's computer is normally a reference to Gur from Invader Zim. However, now it's apparently a Lucky Star wallpaper instead. There's a reference to what I assume is the angry video game nerd when eavesdropping on Susie and Noelle. They changed this, of course, but I'm not 100% sure what it's referencing. A streamer I was watching thought it was referencing Keyboard Crasher, which is the video of the German kid smashing his keyboard, which became a meme in Japan. When eavesdropping on Chris, the dialogue by the person on the phone is a little more specific than in English, and says that Chris can't enter dark worlds without the soul. I find it interesting that they clarified this detail here with how ambiguous it was in English. For Jackenstein's dialogue, he randomly switches between hiragana and katakana. often within the same word, with no discernible pattern. He also spaces out a bunch of words for emphasis, and uses kawamoji in place of emoticons. The biblioc spelling problems are still in English, but they're made much more obvious now. This one is pretty obscure, but if you backtrack far enough, you'll encounter bibliocs talking to a captain, who says, "Oh, my cup, my lad, listen to my long tale." A is for apple, B is for bee, C is for, Enye is for new, mumble mumble. This becomes, oh cup, oh young ones, listen to my long tale." A is for almond, I is for inko, U is for, Va is for violin, mumble mumble. The joke with that last line is that this is an extremely unusual way to write the Va sound. It's the wa character in katakana with this little mark called dakten to indicate something called voicing, which is basically when your vocal cords vibrate during a consonant sound. A Japanese streamer I watched didn't even know how to pronounce this character when they saw it because it's so unusual. Normally, violin is written like this, with a ba instead. This sound is also sometimes written like this, which uses the u character with dakten and a small a attached. After leaving the Dark World, Susie writes a letter for Alvin from the old man, but her writing is poor and full of errors. To explain how they translated this, I need to give some context. In Japanese hiragana and katakana, there are smaller versions of some of the characters, specifically ya, yu, yo, and tsu. The small ya, yu, yo characters replace the vowel of the character before them. So this would be pronounced ja, rather than jiya. The small tsu is used for a glottal stop, which is used wherever there's doubled consonants. So for example, this would be pronounced motto, where the T is said twice in a row, which is different from moto, where there's only one T sound. In Susie's note, most of the small characters are written at full size. So here, instead of cha, this would be read as chia. And here, instead of omotteta, it's written as omotsuteta. Sometimes the small tsu is omitted entirely. Here it should be hoshikatta, but instead it's written hoshikata. Next, Japanese has these things called particles, which attach to words or phrases to indicate their role in a sentence. Now, while Japanese hiragana and katakana are mostly phonetic, some of the particles are written with their historical spellings, likely for the sake of readability. For example, wa is written with this character, which is normally pronounced ha. E is written with this character, which is normally pronounced he. And o is written with this character, which in some dialects and in older Japanese is also pronounced wo. But in modern standard Japanese, it's indistinguishable from o. I say all this because Susie mistakenly writes o as o throughout the letter. Interestingly though, she knows how to write wa and e correctly, so we gotta give her some credit there. If you inspect this dresser twice, you'll get the line, "It's a word for robes." The Japanese version says something like, "They seem to call these dressers filled with enough robes to make you go wa, a wardrobe." Yeah, this one seems like a bit of a stretch, I'm gonna be honest. And that's all for now. This video was much more of a struggle to write compared to the last two. Hopefully covering both chapters helps make up for the long gap in time. If you have questions on something I didn't mention, feel free to ask in the comments and I'll try to answer them. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, bye bye.